The night my family threw my daughter into a rotting shed behind the house, something inside me finally broke. What started as a cruel birthday humiliation turned into a slow revenge story about betrayal, foreclosure, hidden debt, and a daughter who stopped saving the people destroying her life. As the mold spread through the walls, the lies inside this perfect suburban family started collapsing too. Chapter 1. The Key in the Velvet Box. The morning of my daughter's 15th birthday smelled like cinnamon coffee, vanilla frosting, and a kind of peace I did not trust. It was September 2025 in Franklin, Tennessee, the kind of early fall morning when the air still carried summer heat, but the leaves had started pretending they were ready to change. My parents' house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, white shutters, trimmed hedges, American flag by the porch, everything polished enough to make strangers believe good people lived there. Inside, my mother was humming. That should have warned me. Mary Ann Whitmore did not hum unless she had an audience coming. She moved around the kitchen in her pearl earrings and pressed blouse, arranging cupcakes on a cake stand like we were hosting the governor instead of a family birthday party. My father, Thomas, stood in the dining room polishing silverware that only came out on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and occasions when my mother needed proof that we were a respectable family. For once, nobody was criticizing my shoes. Nobody was reminding me that the upstairs hallway light still flickered because I had not had time to fix it. Nobody was telling Ivy to stop hovering, or move faster, or be careful not to make a mess. It was too calm. Ivy stood beside the dining table folding napkins into careful little triangles. She had braided her own hair that morning, loose brown strands already slipping around her cheeks. The dress she wore was pale blue, bought at a thrift store 3 towns over and altered by me after midnight with a borrowed sewing machine and too much coffee. She looked beautiful in the quiet way she always did, like she was afraid taking up too much beauty would get her punished. By noon, my brother Grant arrived with his wife Elise and their daughter Sienna, and the whole temperature of the house changed. Grant walked in first, sunglasses still on, car keys swinging from one finger, all confidence and cologne. At 47, he still carried himself like the high school quarterback everyone had promised would be important forever. Elise followed, in a cream linen dress, phone already up, recording little snippets for whatever version of her life she posted online. She owned a boutique decor and gift shop downtown, the kind of place that sold candles for $40 and signs that said "blessed" in distressed wood. She kissed the air beside my mother's cheek and immediately turned the camera toward the cupcakes. Sienna came last, 16, glossy-haired, polished, and used to entering rooms that rearranged themselves around her. My mother lit up before the girl even said hello. Mary Ann crossed the room to fix a curl near Sienna's cheek, then held both her hands like a pageant winner had just come home. Ivy stood 3 feet away with napkins in her hands. "Happy birthday," Sienna said, to her, bright and careless. Ivy smiled and said, "Thank you." Then Sienna looked past her toward the driveway. "Can I show it yet, Grandma?" My mother gave a little laugh, the kind that meant not yet, but I want everyone to know something is coming. That was when I saw the car. A silver Lexus NX sat in the driveway with a giant red bow stretched across the hood. New plates, clean windows, sunlight flashing off the chrome like a dare. It looked absurdly expensive against the faded brick of my parents' house, like a commercial had been dropped into our front yard by mistake. Ivy saw it too. Her fingers tightened around the napkins until the edges bent. She turned toward me slowly, eyes wide, breath held somewhere between fear and hope. I hated myself for what I felt next. Hope. After everything, after every forgotten school award, every Christmas where Sienna got gold jewelry and Ivy got socks, every Sunday dinner where my daughter cleared plates while my niece posed for pictures, some small, stupid part of me still wanted to believe my parents had finally done something kind. Maybe they had planned a surprise. Maybe the learner's permit talk was misdirection. Maybe the velvet box I saw in my mother's hand later really was for Ivy.
That is what emotional hunger does. It makes a grown woman believe in miracles offered by people who have only ever charged interest. We gathered in the dining room after lunch. My mother insisted presents come before cake. She said food could wait, memories could not. That was the kind of sentence she liked, polished enough to sound loving and hollow enough to hold anything. Ivy opened a few gifts first: a drugstore perfume set from Elise, a bracelet from Grant that still had the clearance sticker on the back, a sketchbook from me that I had saved for by taking 2 extra repair calls after work. When she opened it, she hugged it to her chest before she hugged me. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. I felt her ribs through the dress. Then my father tapped his glass with a fork. My mother stepped forward holding the small velvet box. The room went quiet. Ivy looked at the box, then at the window, then at me. Her hands trembled as she took it. The velvet looked too expensive against her fingers. My mother stood smiling, proud and composed, as if she were about to bless the child she had spent 15 years treating like an inconvenience. Ivy opened the lid. Inside was a key, small, silver, gleaming. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. I watched hope flood my daughter's face so fast it hurt. Her mouth parted, her eyes filled. She looked at me, and I saw the child she had never been allowed to be, excited, chosen, seen. Then the kitchen door swung open. My father carried in a 3-layer cake with gold frosting and white piping across the top. "Congratulations, Sienna." The room exploded. Elise gasped like she had not known. Grant clapped. My mother pulled Sienna into her arms and announced that her brilliant granddaughter had passed the first stage of getting her license and deserved something special for all her hard work. Thomas reached into his pocket and lifted another key, this one with a Lexus fob attached. The car outside was hers. Cameras came out. Elise recorded Sienna squealing by the window. Grant said something about responsibility and success. My mother wiped at her eyes as if witnessing a sacred milestone. Ivy stood there holding the little silver key. Her smile disappeared, slowly, not all at once. That would have been easier. It faded piece by piece while she tried to understand how a room full of adults had made her the punchline at her own birthday. My mother finally turned back to her. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, "don't look like that. Yours is for something different. You're such a mature girl. You understand these things." Ivy looked at the key. "What is it for?" Thomas smiled like he was doing us a favor. "Come on, we'll show you." They led us through the kitchen, out the back door, across the patchy lawn. I already knew before we stopped. I think some part of me had known from the moment I saw my mother smile. The old shed sat behind the house near the fence line. I had asked Thomas to tear it down. The roof sagged at one corner. Rain had warped the door. The siding was soft from rot. My father unlocked it with a rusty scrape and pulled the door open. The smell hit first. Mold, wet wood, old soil, something sour underneath. Inside, gardening tools leaned against one wall. Cracked plastic bins sat in the corner. There was no insulation, no HVAC, no proper flooring, just swollen boards that gave slightly under Thomas's shoe. A strip of daylight showed through a gap near the roof. My mother spread her hands. "Your own space." Ivy stared into the shed. "For us?" she asked. Elise smiled in that careful way women smile when they are being cruel but want witnesses to call it kindness. "Sienna really needs your room for her content studio," she said. "She has opportunities now." Thomas added that teenage girls needed independence. Grant stood behind them with his arms folded, looking almost bored. Ivy's voice came out small. "You mean we're supposed to live here?" No one flinched. No one laughed nervously or corrected themselves, or noticed that my daughter's birthday had turned into an eviction notice wrapped in velvet. Something in me went very still. Not empty, not numb, still. I had spent 39 years explaining, softening, absorbing, apologizing. I had learned how to keep my face calm while my mother cut me in public. I had learned how to fix drywall, patch pipes, stretch groceries, pay rent to people who called it generosity, and raise a child in the smallest upstairs bedroom of a house that had never truly let us belong. But standing there, watching Ivy hold that key like it was evidence of her own worthlessness, I felt the last thread snap, without making a sound. I took out my phone. I photographed the key in Ivy's palm, the velvet box, the shed door, the black mold near the baseboard, the gardening tools stacked where a bed was supposed to go. Then I stepped back and took one picture of all of them, my parents, my brother, my sister-in-law, standing in a row with the satisfied faces of people who believed they had the power to decide where we belonged. Thomas frowned. "What's that for?" "Documentation," I said. The word made my mother's smile tighten. "Don't start with your attitude, Celeste." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "I won't." A few days before, I had noticed a new water stain along the laundry room wall inside the house. The paint had bubbled low near the baseboard, and when I pressed it with my thumb, it gave just enough to tell me moisture had been sitting behind it longer than anyone wanted to admit. I had planned to open the wall after Ivy's birthday, check the crawlspace, trace the leak, do what I had done for years, patch the problem before it embarrassed them. But standing beside that shed, I realized something simple. That house was no longer my responsibility. That night, Ivy sat on the edge of her bed with the silver key in her lap. The party was over downstairs, though I could still hear Grant laughing and Elise replaying Sienna's car video at full volume. My daughter's cake had barely been touched. Ivy rubbed her thumb over the key. "Are we really moving out there?" she asked.
I sat beside her and brushed a loose braid from her cheek. No. She looked at me. Then where are we going? I opened my banking app. For 15 years, a recurring payment labeled rent left my account every month and went to my parents. They called it contribution. I called it survival. That night, the screen asked if I was sure I wanted to cancel future transfers. My thumb hovered for one breath. Then I pressed confirm. For the first time in my life, I did something without asking my family's permission.
Chapter 2. A House That Was Never Home. The house sounded happier after we decided to leave it. I could hear laughter drifting up through the floorboards while Ivy folded her clothes into black trash bags because we did not own matching luggage. Grant was downstairs retelling the Lexus story for the third time, like Sienna had just won an Olympic medal instead of getting a learner's permit in Williamson County. Every few minutes someone laughed loud enough for us to hear. That part felt intentional. I opened the closet and pulled down the old plastic storage bin that held our winter clothes. The lid cracked on one side, the same crack I had duct-taped 3 winters ago after Thomas told me buying a new bin was wasteful. Inside sat an old church photo album beneath a pile of sweaters. I stared at it for a second before setting it aside. There were hundreds of pictures in that house. Sienna at dance recitals, Sienna at cheer competitions, Sienna holding certificates, trophies, birthday cakes, puppies, graduation ribbons. Entire walls dedicated to documenting her existence. There were maybe 4 pictures of Ivy. 2 were school photos Marianne kept tucked near the laundry room. One was from elementary school when Ivy lost her front tooth. The last was accidental, caught blurry in the background of Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I used to think that kind of thing happened naturally, that some kids were just louder, easier to celebrate. Then I realized Ivy had learned to disappear before anyone asked her to. I folded one of her hoodies and remembered her at 7 years old apologizing because she dropped a spoon in the sink too loudly. At 9, she started automatically taking the smallest slice of pizza before dinner even started. At 11, she spilled grape juice on the counter and cried harder than the situation deserved because she thought Grandma would be mad about the stain. Nobody teaches a child that level of caution directly. They absorb it slowly, like smoke trapped inside curtains. I packed the sketchbook I had given her earlier that day and slid it carefully between towels so the corners would not bend. Behind me, Ivy zipped another bag. "Do we take the space heater?" she asked quietly. I looked toward the hallway. The space heater technically belonged to my parents, but I had bought it 3 winters ago when the upstairs heat stopped working for 6 days, and Thomas said wearing thicker socks built character. "Yes," I said, "we take it." That made her pause. "You think they'll notice?" I almost laughed. "Baby, they notice when I used too much laundry detergent. Trust me, they'll notice." Downstairs, Elise squealed about getting the perfect lighting beside the Lexus for pictures. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Then I kept packing. Every object in that room carried a memory attached to survival. The lamp I rewired myself because Thomas refused to replace it. The little bookshelf rescued from a curb outside a townhouse development. The faded comforter Naomi had secretly dropped off one winter after I mentioned our upstairs window leaked cold air. I reached under the bed and pulled out my metal toolbox. The weight of it steadied me. I did not become a contractor because it was my dream. I became one because a pipe burst behind the downstairs washing machine 12 years ago, and Thomas stood in the flooded laundry room cursing about how useless repair companies were. I had been working the front desk at a motel back then, picking up extra shifts cleaning rooms on weekends while raising Ivy and paying rent to my own parents. The plumber they called quoted nearly $2,000. Thomas lost his mind over the price. I remember standing there, soaked ankle-deep in dirty water, while my father yelled about scams and lazy workers, and something inside me snapped in a very quiet way. So I watched the plumber work. Then I watched YouTube videos after Ivy fell asleep. Then I started fixing small things, then bigger things. Then neighbors started asking if I could help them too. By 2021, I had a Tennessee contractor license, a second-hand Ford F-150, and more side work than free weekends. None of that changed how my family saw me. To them, I was still the daughter sleeping upstairs, just useful now. I locked the toolbox and stood up. The laughter downstairs got louder again. Ivy looked toward the floor. Do you think they even realize we're actually leaving? I thought about that. No, I said, honestly. I think they think this is punishment. Around midnight, we carried the bags downstairs. Nobody offered to help. Grant sat at the kitchen island drinking bourbon, while Elise edited videos on her phone. Sienna had already changed into pajamas with little gold initials stitched near the pocket. Marianne was wrapping leftover cake slices in plastic containers, like the day had been perfect. Thomas looked up first. What's all this? I adjusted the strap on my duffel bag. We're leaving. Marianne sighed immediately, exhausted already by my audacity. Celeste, stop being dramatic. I kept walking toward the front door. Grant smirked into his glass. You'll be back by next weekend. I turned around then. Not angry, not emotional.
Just done. No, we won't. The room went strangely still after that. Not because they believed me, because people like my family never think the quiet person will actually leave. Marianne stood. Where exactly are you planning to go at midnight with a teenager? I opened the door. Somewhere we're wanted. Then Ivy and I walked out carrying everything we owned that mattered. The September air felt thick and damp outside. Cicadas buzzed in the dark trees lining the cul-de-sac, while I loaded trash bags into the back of my truck beneath the yellow porch light. Not one person followed us outside, not even Ivy's grandparents. I drove with both windows cracked open because the truck's AC only worked when it felt inspired. Ivy sat curled against the passenger door, clutching her backpack and the stupid silver shed key she still had not thrown away. We passed strip malls, gas stations, dark churches, quiet subdivisions glowing blue from television screens behind curtains. About 20 minutes into the drive, Ivy spoke without looking at me. I'm sorry. The words hit me so hard I nearly missed the exit ramp. For what? For ruining everything. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. You didn't ruin anything. She shrugged one shoulder the way kids do when they already believe something bad about themselves. If I wasn't here, you wouldn't have to deal with them. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner before I answered, because I needed a second to breathe. The neon sign buzzed above us while rain started misting lightly across the windshield. Inside, the waitress looked about 60 and called everyone honey without sounding fake about it. We slid into a booth near the window. Ivy sat carefully, like she was afraid taking up too much space might cost extra. She ordered the cheapest thing on the menu without checking the prices out loud, but I noticed anyway. When the waitress brought our pie slices, she added extra whipped cream onto Ivy's plate and winked. Birthday girl gets bonus sugar. Ivy blinked at her. Just like that? Confused by kindness. I looked away,
because suddenly my eyes burned. After we ate, I checked my phone. One text from Naomi Mercer. "You two can stay as long as you need. Doors open." Naomi and I had met years ago through warehouse work, before I shifted fully into repair jobs. She lived alone in a small ranch-style house outside downtown Franklin and possessed the rare ability to make other people feel safe without demanding anything in return. When we arrived, the porch light was already on. Naomi opened the door wearing sweatpants and reading glasses. No makeup, no performance. No questions that sounded like judgment disguised as concern. She just took one look at Ivy's face and stepped aside. "Come in, babies." That almost broke me. The house smelled like lavender detergent and old books. Small, clean, quiet. Ivy stood in the kitchen uncertainly, while Naomi pointed toward the fridge. "There's leftover chicken casserole if you're hungry later." Ivy hesitated. "Can I open it?" Naomi frowned softly. "Honey, you don't need permission to exist here." The silence after that sentence felt enormous. I apologized 3 separate times in the first 10 minutes. Once for the muddy footprints by the door, once because the shower took too long to warm up, once because Ivy accidentally dropped a fork in the sink. Naomi watched me carefully each time. By the 4th apology, she touched my arm. "Celeste," she said gently, "what happened in that house to make you this afraid all the time?" I did not answer, because the truth was too large for midnight. Naomi made up the pull-out couch for Ivy and gave me the guest room, even after I argued about it twice. Around 1 in the morning, the house finally went dark. No yelling downstairs, no passive-aggressive comments through walls, no heavy footsteps stopping outside our door. Just silence. Real silence. And somehow that felt more terrifying than noise. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me, while my nervous system waited for something bad to happen. My body had spent so many years bracing for criticism that peace itself felt suspicious. At almost 3 in the morning, I got out of bed for water. My tool belt sat near the front door, beside my boots and duffel bag. The leather was cracked from years of use. My flashlight still hung from one side. A tape measure poked from the front pouch. I stared at it in the dim kitchen light and realized something that should have been obvious years earlier. I had spent 15 years repairing a house that never truly wanted me inside it.
Chapter 3. They didn't miss their daughter. They missed their repairman. The first week away from my parents' house passed so quietly that I almost mistook it for peace. I picked up 2 small repair jobs in Brentwood, patched a drywall seam in an older couple's hallway, replaced a leaking garbage disposal for a woman who paid me in cash and sent me home with zucchini bread. Ivy started sleeping through the night on Naomi's pull-out couch. Not perfectly, not like a child who had never learned to listen for footsteps, but better. She laughed once while watching an old sitcom with Naomi, and the sound startled me so much I nearly dropped a coffee mug. Then, on the 7th morning, my phone rang at 6:12. Marianne Whitmore. I stared at the screen until it stopped. It rang again immediately. Naomi was already awake at the kitchen table, reading glasses low on her nose, coffee steaming beside her hand. She looked at the phone, then at me. "You don't have to answer." "I know." But I did. Before I said a word, my mother's voice sliced through the line. "What did you do to this house?" I stood very still in Naomi's kitchen, one hand on the counter, bare feet against the cool tile. "I left." "Do not lie to me, Celeste." "I left." "You did something before you left. Your father says there's a smell in the basement. The laundry wall is soft. The whole downstairs smells like rot." I closed my eyes.
The water stain, the bubbled paint, the wall that had given slightly under my thumb. What did Dad do after I left? It is not the point. It usually is. Her breath went sharp. After everything we sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us? I looked toward the living room where Ivy was still asleep under a quilt Naomi had given her. One arm was curled around her backpack, like she still expected someone to take it. You charged me rent for 15 years, Mom. There was silence. Then Marianne said, colder now, You always had a talent for making yourself the victim. I ended the call. For the rest of that day, my phone buzzed like an insect trapped under glass. Thomas called twice, Grant once. Elise sent a text that said, This is getting really ugly, Celeste. Think about Ivy. I did not answer any of them. By afternoon, the Whitmore house had become neighborhood business. Franklin had a way of pretending gossip was concern. People called it checking in, praying over someone, asking because they cared. What they really meant was that somebody had posted something in a neighborhood Facebook group, and now everyone wanted a front row seat. The first official thing came from Patrice Holloway, the HOA board secretary for my parents' subdivision. Patrice was 58, sharp-haired, always in visor sunglasses, the kind of woman could weaponize a clipboard at a bake sale. She sent a warning to my mother about odor complaints, possible moisture damage, and visible deterioration near the rear foundation wall. Naomi read it over my shoulder after Marianne forwarded it to me with 7 question marks. That's fast, Naomi said. That smell must be bad. Was it already happening? I nodded. Behind the laundry wall, maybe the crawlspace too, I noticed it before Ivy's birthday. Naomi looked at me carefully. And you didn't fix it. They gave my daughter a shed key at her birthday party. That wasn't a question. I set the phone face down. No, I didn't fix it. 2 days later, an insurance adjuster named Daniel Reyes inspected the house. I heard about it from Thomas first because he left a voicemail long enough to qualify as a sermon. Your stunt is not going to work. The insurance man is here, and we are telling everything. You were the last person who touched that laundry room. If you think we won't say that, you're mistaken. I deleted the voicemail after saving a copy. That had become my new habit. Save first, feel later. Daniel Reyes called me that evening from a number I did not recognize. His voice was measured, professional, tired in the way people sound when they have spent all day standing in damaged homes listening to families lie. Ms. Whitmore, I'm reviewing a property damage claim involving your parents' residence. They indicated you performed maintenance at the property. I did, for years. Were you paid as a contractor? Not by them. I paid them rent. A pause.
I see. I almost laughed at that. Men in insurance were trained not to react, but sometimes silence said plenty. He asked about the laundry wall, the crawlspace access, past repairs. I answered factually. I told him about the recurring moisture near the baseboards, the slow drain backup I had mentioned to Thomas in June, the musty odor that came and went after heavy rain. I told him I had not entered the property since the night of Ivy's birthday. Do you have documentation of that? Yes. Photos? Yes. Timestamps? Yes. Another pause. That would be helpful. So I sent him what I had: the shed, the key, the date, the time, the exterior shot of us leaving with bags in the bed of my Ford, the one accidental photo Ivy had taken from the diner booth that night with the receipt visible on the table. By Friday, the neighborhood had chosen sides. At first, not ours.
Marianne posted around noon. My daughter destroyed our home out of spite after we tried to help her become independent. Please pray for families dealing with adult children who punish love. She added a picture of the laundry wall, swollen and streaked brown, near the trim. Elise shared it 10 minutes later. Some women resent happy families so much they'll ruin anything they can't control. That was the one that cost me money. By 3 o'clock, a woman in Fieldstone Creek canceled a bathroom repair. Then a small deck job postponed indefinitely. Then another client stopped responding. By the next morning, screenshots from my business page were circulating in a local moms group with captions like, "Would you hire someone accused of sabotaging her own parents' house?" I sat in Naomi's driveway in my truck, staring at the cancellations until the numbers blurred. This was how my family worked. They did not just want obedience, they wanted witnesses. If they could not control me in private, they would try to shrink me in public. I thought I was holding together until Ivy opened the passenger door. She had heard enough. Her face was pale. "Mrs. Dalton said your grandma posted that you're ungrateful." I turned the phone screen down. Mrs. Dalton should mind her own business. Ivy climbed into the truck and shut the door softly. "If we go back, will they stop?" That question broke something different in me. Not loud, not dramatic, just a clean internal fracture. Because my daughter at 15 had already learned the same math I had spent my whole life using. Give them what they want and maybe they will stop hurting you. Apologize first and maybe the room will stay calm. Make yourself useful and maybe they will call it love. I looked at her and said, "We are not going back." Her eyes filled, but she nodded. That night, Naomi found me at the kitchen table with my laptop open, taking screenshots of every post, every comment, every cancellation, every text. "Good," she said. I looked up. "Good?" People like that don't want peace. They want access, so document what they do when they lose it. I did. I saved Marianne's post, Elise's caption, Grant's comment with the folded hands emoji, Patrice's HOA notice, Daniel Reyes's email confirming he had received my timeline. I saved everything into a folder labeled Whitmore House. Then I wrote one post, not angry, not poetic, not long. I attached 4 photos. Ivy's silver key in the velvet box, the shed with gardening tools still inside, the time-stamped photo from the night we left, the HOA warning dated a full week after our departure. Then I wrote, "My daughter and I left my parents' house on September 14th. We have not entered the property since. This is where they asked us to live." That was all. I posted it at 8:17 p.m. By midnight, it had been shared hundreds of times. By morning, the comments had changed. People noticed the shed first, then the key, then the dates. Women I had never met wrote that they knew exactly what this kind of family looked like. A former client reposted pictures of a laundry room I had repaired for her the year before and wrote, "Celeste doesn't sabotage homes, she saves them." Tara Nguyen, one of the moderators for the Franklin Moms Exchange, locked Marianne's post for misinformation by noon. Elise deleted her caption. Grant took down his comment. My business page gained 32 new messages in one day. One of them came from a property manager in Cool Springs. She wrote, "I don't know your family, but you seem like the only honest person in this story. I have 3 rental units that need work." I stared at that message longer than I should have, not because it fixed everything, because for once the truth had arrived not too late. That evening, Ivy sat beside me on Naomi's back steps while the sky turned soft purple over the yard. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. "I don't want to go back there," she said. It was the first time she had said it without asking if she was allowed.
I looked at her profile, the line of her nose, the careful set of her shoulders, and I saw something beginning, small, fragile, almost invisible. A child choosing herself. I said, "I know." My phone rang again after dark. "Thomas." I almost ignored it. Then I answered because some part of me wanted to hear what losing control sounded like. His voice was not angry this time. It was worse. "Celeste, please, just come look at it." I stood in Naomi's entryway, my tool belt hanging on the hook beside the door. My hand did not move toward it. "Call a contractor, Dad." "You were a contractor." "No," I said. "I was your daughter." He said my name once, low and strained, like maybe he had remembered that too late. I ended the call and looked at the tool belts until the house went quiet around me. For the first time in my life, I let something fall apart without reaching for a wrench.
Chapter 4. The rot was always there. Winter arrived slowly in Franklin that year, like the town itself was reluctant to admit something ugly had already started dying. By November, the Whitmore house smelled bad enough that neighbors stopped pretending not to notice. The odor drifted through the crawl space vents and settled near the sidewalk after rainstorms. Patrice Holloway sent 2 more HOA notices before Thanksgiving, both worded politely enough to sound civilized and threatening enough to matter. My mother forwarded every single one to me, sometimes with question marks, sometimes with Bible verses, sometimes with nothing at all. I stopped responding. A week before Christmas, Daniel Reyes emailed the final insurance determination. Claim denied due to long-term negligence, deferred maintenance, repeated moisture exposure, and pre-existing structural deterioration. I read the sentence 3 times while sitting in my truck outside a hardware supply store. Then I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because my father had spent most of my life insisting every problem could be patched temporarily if you were smart enough. Turns out, Mold disagreed. The estimate attached to the report was worse. $148,000, structural flooring replacement, plumbing remediation, mold containment, wall demolition, electrical inspection, code compliance repairs. The house was rotting from underneath itself, and the worst part was that none of it surprised me. I had seen pieces of it for years. Soft flooring near the laundry room, musty air after storms, hairline stains around baseboards. Thomas always called it cosmetic. Marianne always called me dramatic when I pushed for bigger repairs. Now the damage had numbers attached to it. American families only panic once suffering becomes paperwork. Around New Year's, I learned the real reason my parents were spiraling, not the mold, money. I found out by accident when Grant showed up at one of my repair jobs. I was replacing warped fence boards behind a townhouse near Cool Springs when his black SUV rolled into the driveway. He stepped out wearing a camel coat that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment, but he looked exhausted, pale, sweating despite the cold. "What do you want?" I asked without stopping my drill. He shoved his hands into his pockets. "You could at least answer Mom's calls. You could at least help your parents." His jaw tightened. "I do help them." I finally looked at him then. "No, Grant, you use them." That hit harder than I expected because he looked away immediately. For a second, I saw something underneath the polished version of my brother, not confidence, fear. Then he said something he clearly did not plan to admit. "Dad refinanced because of me." The drill went quiet in my hand. "What?" Grant rubbed his forehead. Back in 2022, interest rates were already getting bad. Elise's store was struggling after inflation hit. My commissions dropped, and we got behind. How behind? He gave a humorless laugh. You don't want the real number. Turns out I did. Credit cards, business debt, a second vehicle lease, tax issues from Elise's boutique. My parents opened a HELOC against the house to keep Grant afloat because Marianne could not stand the idea of her golden son looking unsuccessful. Mortgage balance over $312,000 on a house that already needed 6 figures of repair work. I stared at him for a long moment. So all those years Mom acted like I was financially ruining them? Grant didn't answer, because he couldn't. The silence told me everything. By February, the perfect family image started cracking in public. Elise quietly began selling luxury handbags online through consignment pages. Sienna stopped posting from the Lexus as often. Then, one afternoon, I saw the car parked behind a strip mall while Elise argued with a man in a polo shirt holding paperwork. 3 weeks later, the Lexus disappeared completely. Nobody said repossession out loud. They did not have to. Franklin's suburbs ran on silent humiliation. Everybody noticed everything. They just pretended manners erased cruelty. The city inspection notices started showing up around March. Bright orange papers taped beside the front door. Mold hazard warnings, repair compliance deadlines. Neighbors complained about moisture smells drifting through open windows. Every now and then, I drove past the house without stopping. I told myself it was coincidence the first few times. It wasn't. The lawn had gone uneven because nobody remembered to cut it consistently anymore. One gutter sagged over the garage where I used to climb a ladder every spring and clear leaves myself. Paint peeled near the porch railing I had repainted 3 summers in a row, while Marianne criticized the color choices. One rainy afternoon, I slowed at the stop sign across the street and looked at the place long enough to feel grief rise unexpectedly inside me. Not for the house itself, for the version of me that had kept trying to earn love there. I had fixed windows in January with numb fingers, patched drywall after storms, crawled beneath the house with a flashlight when snakes nested near the pipes. Every repair had been treated like expected labor, not care. Ivy sat beside me in the truck that day, eating fries from a paper bag. "You okay?" she asked softly. "Yeah." She looked at the house. "I don't miss it." I nodded slowly. "I know." That spring, something changed in Ivy, too. Small things at first. She joined the art club at school after Maddie Cole invited her. She started leaving her sketchbook open on Naomi's kitchen table instead of hiding it in her backpack. One night, she asked Naomi if we could order Chinese food instead of apologizing for being hungry. The first time she laughed loudly enough to snort soda through her nose, she froze afterwards, automatically waiting for criticism. Nobody gave her any. Naomi just handed her a napkin and kept watching television. Ivy looked confused for almost a full minute. Children should not need recovery time after laughing. One Saturday afternoon, she came home carrying a charcoal portrait she drew in art club. It was beautiful. Sharp lines, careful shading, stronger than anything she used to draw. "Can we hang it up?" she asked. Then she caught herself. "I mean, only if it's okay." Naomi walked past with laundry and answered before I could. "Honey, if you live somewhere, you're allowed to put yourself on the walls." I watched Ivy smile without shrinking afterward. That was when I realized healing is sometimes embarrassingly small. Not dramatic speeches, not breakthroughs. Just a child learning she is allowed to exist at full volume. Around Easter, Father Brennan Walsh called me. I almost ignored it until I realized Marianne probably sent him. His voice carried that careful church softness people use when preparing to tell women to endure more pain gracefully. Your mother is struggling, Celeste. She should call a contractor. This isn't about repairs. I leaned against my truck outside Lowell's and closed my eyes. Then what is it about? Family deserves grace. There it was, that word. Grace. The thing women are expected to hand out endlessly while other people bleed them dry. Grace and access aren't the same thing, Father. He was quiet for a moment. Your parents are frightened. So was my daughter. That ended the conversation. By early June 2026, the foreclosure was finalized. Auction date announced. The property sat toxic on the market because nobody wanted a mold-heavy house tied up in liens and code violations. Investors only circled because they smelled desperation. At night, after Ivy fell asleep, I started running numbers at Naomi's kitchen table. Freedom Fund savings around $34,000. Contractor savings from the past 6 months. Possible renovation loan through the local credit union. Naomi offering to co-sign a short-term bridge loan even after I argued with her twice about it. You could finally walk away, she told me one night. I know. Then why are you looking at that house like it's unfinished business? I stared at the foreclosure notice glowing on my laptop screen. Some places hurt you so deeply that you spend your whole life running from them. Or you go back and change what they mean. Chapter 5. The House That Stopped Owning Me. The auction was held on a Tuesday morning in July, inside the Williamson County Municipal Building, in a room that smelled like burnt coffee, printer paper, and old carpet. It was not dramatic. No judge in a black robe, no pounding gavel that echoed like justice. Just folding chairs, a long table, a county employee with a stack of files, and a handful of men in polo shirts who looked at damaged houses the way vultures look at fields. Ivy waited in the hallway with Naomi. She had insisted on coming, then stopped at the doorway like her body refused to cross into anything connected to that address. I stepped back toward her. You don't have to go in. She stared at the floor tiles. That house never wanted us there. I wanted to say houses did not want things, but that would have been a lie. Some places are shaped by the people who control them. Some walls learn the voices inside them. Some rooms remember who was allowed to take up space and who was only allowed to clean it. So I touched her shoulder and said, "Then it doesn't get to decide anymore." She nodded, but she stayed in the hallway. Naomi squeezed my hand once. You know your ceiling. I know. Do not get pulled into proving something. I almost smiled. Too late for that. Inside the room, Eric Sloan was already sitting near the front. I recognized him from contractor supply stores around Franklin, a real estate investor with perfect teeth and a habit of calling houses units, even when families had lived and cried and grown up inside them. He flipped properties fast, painted everything gray, replaced history with vinyl plank, and called it revitalization. He glanced at me when I sat down. You bidding on nostalgia, Celeste? I looked straight ahead. No. He chuckled. Good. Nostalgia is expensive. The county employee read the property details in a flat voice. Address, parcel number, mortgage default, known code violations, mold disclosure, structural concerns, possible liens, property sold as is, where is, with all defects and responsibilities transferred to buyer. With every word, people shifted in their seats. That was the first time the house helped me. Its damage scared off anyone who did not know exactly what was wrong with it. I did. The bidding opened lower than I expected, but still high enough to make my pulse kick hard. I had my freedom fund, contractor savings, the local credit union renovation loan approval, and Naomi's short-term bridge loan sitting like a safety net I hated needing. It was enough on paper. Paper did not care what fear did to your hands. Bids came slowly at first. A contractor in the back raised once, then stopped. Eric raised twice. I raised after him, keeping my voice steady. The room narrowed around numbers. I thought of every payment I had made to my parents labeled rent. Every Saturday I spent replacing caulk instead of taking Ivy to the movies. Every time Thomas told me I should be grateful to have a roof over my head while I stood beneath a ceiling I had patched myself. Eric turned slightly. You understand what remediation costs right now? Yes. You sure your little repair business can carry that? I finally looked at him. No, but my license can. His smile faded. The county employee asked for another bid. Eric lifted his hand once more. I lifted mine after him. Then silence. The number sat in the air, low enough that the house was being sold for a fraction of what it had once been worth, high enough that it represented every safe dollar I had built in secret. The county employee looked around the room. No one moved. Eric leaned back, annoyed but not stupid. Mold, liens, code compliance, and a licensed contractor willing to live inside a repair project were more trouble than his margins wanted. He dropped his pen onto his folder. I'm out. The county employee repeated the amount, waited, then marked the file. Just like that, the house was mine. Nobody clapped. I did not cry. I walked to the table, signed my name where they told me to sign, and watched my hand tremble slightly over the last page. The clerk slid copies toward me. Keys would come later. Access paperwork, title processing, repair responsibility, deadlines. It felt less like victory than surgery, necessary, painful, precise. When I stepped into the hallway, Ivy stood up. Naomi looked at my face and already knew. You got it, she said. I nodded. Ivy did not smile at first. She looked scared. Are we going to live there? Only if we make it ours first. That took almost a year. People like to imagine rebuilding as a montage. Music, fresh paint, sunlight through new windows, before and after photos that make pain look tidy. It was not tidy. It was demolition bags lined up by the curb. It was respirators, gloves, mold containment plastic, county permits, and inspections that never seemed to end. It was crawling under the house with a flashlight while my knees sank into damp soil. It was ripping out walls that had held 15 years of silence. Colin Mercer, Naomi's nephew, helped with the electrical work because I refused to touch anything outside my license. He was 28, quiet, careful, and smart enough to make the project about rescuing me. He showed up, did clean work, drank gas station coffee, and went home. That was the kind of help I trusted. I gutted the laundry room first. Behind the wall, the rot was worse than even Daniel Reyes had guessed. Black staining climbed along studs. The old pipe had been leaking slowly long before Ivy's birthday, long before the shed, long before my mother accused me of revenge. The house had been telling the truth for years. Nobody wanted to listen. I sealed the crawl space, replaced subflooring, brought plumbing up to code, repaired the porch railing, cleared gutters, repainted room by room, not in the color Marianne would have chosen, but in colors Ivy picked from sample cards at Home Depot. Soft green for the kitchen, warm white for the hallway, deep blue for Ivy's room. The first time I told her she could choose whatever color she wanted, she stared at the paint chips for almost 15 minutes. All mine? All yours. She picked the blue carefully, like the wrong shade might be taken away. Later, when we hung her charcoal portrait on the wall, she started to say sorry because it took up too much space. Then she stopped herself. I saw it happen. The apology rose to her mouth, met the new version of her, and disappeared. She stepped back, looked at the framed art, and said, "It looks good there." I had to turn away for a second. That was the real renovation. Not the walls, not the floors. Her. News about my parents reached me the way suburban consequences usually do, through people who did not want to gossip but absolutely did. Mary Ann and Thomas moved into a small apartment off Murrowsboro Road. Second floor, no yard, no dining room large enough to stage family dinners. Grant stopped answering most of their calls after the HELOC documents became family knowledge. Elise and Grant separated before Thanksgiving. The Lexus was repossessed quietly in the parking lot behind Sienna's cheer gym. I did not celebrate any of it. That surprises people when I tell the story. They expect satisfaction, maybe a little cruelty, maybe a scene where I stand on the porch of the restored house and make my parents look at what they lost. I never did. There's a difference between wanting people punished and refusing to keep protecting them from themselves. I chose the second. By September 2026, the house no longer smelled like mold. It smelled like sawdust, lemon cleaner, and the apple candles Ivy liked, even though I told her one was plenty and she bought 3 with birthday money anyway. On Ivy's 16th birthday, the morning light came through the kitchen window across cabinets I had sanded myself. Naomi brought cinnamon rolls, Maddie came over with a handmade card, Grant dropped off a small toolkit for Ivy because she had started asking how to fix things instead of assuming broken meant permanent. I waited until after breakfast. Then I set a velvet box on the table. Ivy stayed still. The whole room felt it. Her smile did not vanish this time, but it faltered. Her fingers curled against her palm. Trauma has a way of reaching across time and touching a child before anyone else can. I sat beside her. "You don't have to open it." She looked at me, then at the box. "No, I want to." Her hands shook when she lifted the lid. Inside was a key. Not silver and useless. A real car key. A used Subaru Crosstrek sat in the driveway, dark green, 8 years old, fully paid off, safe, reliable, and hers. Ivy stared at it. Then she looked toward the driveway, then back at me. Her eyes filled. "It's not for a shed?" My chest tightened so hard I had to breathe before answering. "No, baby. This one opens something that's actually yours." She laughed and cried at the same time, then threw her arms around me with the force of every birthday she had survived instead of enjoyed. Outside, the Subaru waited in the sun. Behind us, the house stood quiet. Not perfect, not fancy, not the polished museum Mary Ann once tried to keep for other people's approval. Ours. There were still uneven spots in the hallway floor if you knew where to look, a cabinet door that needed adjusting, a porch board I planned to replace before winter, but none of it felt like failure anymore. It felt lived in. I walked through the house later that night after everyone left. Ivy's artwork hung in the hall, her blue bedroom door was open, her laughter, real laughter, had filled the kitchen all afternoon without anyone telling her to lower her voice. People think I won when I bought back the house. They think the revenge was in the auction papers, the foreclosure notice, the way my parents lost the place they used to hold over me. But that wasn't the win. The win came when my daughter stopped apologizing for taking up space. It came when she hung her art on the wall and left it there. It came when she opened a velvet box and learned that not every key is a trap. So, if you had been in my place, would you have gone back to save the house after what they did, or would you have let it fall apart?
And if a place once made you feel small, would you run from it forever, or would you go back and make it yours?